myself or an expert in finance, but truly, we see across, and this is a reflection of what many people are saying. There are signs of green shoots in the economy. We credit you for the positive things that you've done, because we realize your approach has been not just wait for the budget, but do a series of continuous steps. And we recognize truly the impact of the corporate tax. We see the green shoots. We realize to nurture and sustain this recovery and revival that you need to achieve that 6% growth at the very minimal and your overall target of 10%. But we also hear that banks saying there are no borrowers, and businesses are saying that there's no money, or that they're not ready to invest because there's no demand or no consumption. The financial sector is facing loads of problems, and the MSME is also facing problems. So, ma'am, please share with us, what is your path forward for the country? How do you see this recovery? And equally, we want to hear from you, what do you expect from us? Because the private sector is here to support. We believe it is our country as well, and we are extremely happy for the role and the trust and the respect which has been given, and we intend to serve that. So once again, a very warm welcome to you and to the Honorable Secretaries for being here. Mr. T.V. Somanathan, sir, thank you very much for being here also. It is indeed a pleasure and a privilege to have you here, Mr. Athanu. We just heard you as well. And with that, may I kindly request the Honorable Finance Minister to address the gathering, and subsequently questions you may direct to anyone who you would like. Thank you, ma'am. And honestly, can we first give Madam a big hand for the tremendous budget that she has presented. It's on.
Thank you very much, FICCI, for giving me the first day out after the budget.
And you for giving us the first chance.
And I'm glad that you had the chance to question in detail every secretary who's found place here, and I think 2 more are expecting to join. They're here now, you can interact. In most such sessions, I find that more than a one-sided monologue, opening up and being ready to answer the question serves multiple purposes. The individual feels that his question has been answered, and the rest of them who didn't think of that question can always feel, all right, I've also had the benefit of answering. And most often, again, when after a very long budget speech, if I have to do the opening, there's not going to be any novelty in it. So I would only probably say 2 or 3 things. I would want to alter one statement made by Sangeeta ji. We are here to support, is what she said. I'm grateful. But I would have thought that's what you want the government to do to you. So you should be the engine. You should be moving forward. You should really be pulling the economy. And we are here to support. And ideally, in a maximum governance situation, minimum government situation, that's what we should be doing. And I would have thought you'll easily say, remain there, do just that support, not anything more. So I take the spirit with which that's been said by Sangeeta ji, but then the fact is, that's the area to which we are moving. Government will want to be a facilitator. And we do things with a lot of consultation. So from day before, when people have asked me, you must have spent 3-4 weeks in this budget and must have been a long haul. Not 3-4 weeks, this was a longer haul. Since after July budget, for the purposes of wanting to respond to the stakeholder consultations that we've held, because the demands of the economy warranted that we do it. And of course, on some matters, we did come with some interventions, sufficient, inadequate, whatever it may be, we did come up with the interventions. But having come up with some interventions, we didn't leave the rest of the agenda of what we had heard then there and moved ahead. We carried those agenda forward and again fine-tuned them, placed them in the context of the revenue which is being generated and took a call. So I'm not sure if I gave the longest speech, but I probably spent the longest time preparing for a budget. So in a way, the time spent was not just in Delhi, it was also all over the country where we met and interacted with people who had a stake in the economy directly. And although the objective with which I went around the country was to talk about the issues which were very pressing for them, and the other equal agenda during that visit was to talk to the tax administrators to tell them it would be really good if they could achieve the targets given to them without any overreaching. And the overreaching was the issue which was in the mind of most of the tax assessees, and therefore it had a two-pronged strategy of one, keeping them motivated, and two, making sure that they don't really keep obsessing about the targets which we had given them. Whether that has found its immediate impact or not, we still thought it was important for us to express the intent of the government that we mean that we trust the assessees rather than we mean that we trust the assessee, we mean we trust the taxpayer, and that the tax authorities are going to have to be a lot more objective. And that is why we relied on getting technology into a big role. I mean, give technology a bigger role, bring them in, and make sure the assessments are more monitored, more documented, and that is why giving a document number, doing a faceless assessment, and so on were brought in. But even then, it was going towards a position where, end of the day, we wanted the government's commitment to be made very clear, and that is why very rapidly a call was taken on a well-researched proposal of having a taxpayers' charter put into the Act itself. And that was not just for the sake of it, but if it is in the Act, you know to what extent you're going to be able to evoke it, invoke it, and also bring it into use when you think it's necessary. And the details of it is going to tell you what can you expect at a time when you need the fallback mechanism. So these were the ways in which every strand of looking at the taxpayers' difficulties, looking at a particular sector's problem, although the budget has not given you anything sector-specific, it was to give the macro picture. It was also to give the timeline. It was also to give a blueprint of how we want to take the economy forward. It was also to say whether we are fiscally being responsible or not. And it was also to say it's not because of fiscal incentives that industry is going to move forward. We are coming up with activities. We are putting money where assets will be created. When government puts money in infrastructure, of course it has cascading effect. And when particularly government sets itself a disinvestment target, which many immediately would say, oh my God, are you going to be able to achieve it? It's not just a question of achieving it, it's also a question of showing clearly that that achievement of getting that money, which many easily would say, selling family silver. But that money is not going off to something as fancy as a revenue expenditure item, but it's going into creating greater infrastructure for the country, which would probably have a lot more multiplier effect in terms of economic activity than to keep an inefficient public sector. Largely, there are some efficient ones also which are being put on the block. So everywhere the attempt has been to show that we've had a complete thinking through, to show that not only have we thought through it, but we are taking the most prudent route, fiscally prudent route, and end of the day also telling you by when do we want to achieve certain progress, whether it is for housing, whether it's for infrastructure, and so on. So this budget, I'm sure many other earlier finance ministers can also speak about how intensely they've worked in preparing a budget. But here I can tell you, the intensity with which we've done has enabled us to see through the projects and its course, and in the consultation, therefore, we were able to get at whichever stage you would have difficulties or handicap, so that we are keeping that in the preparatory stage itself. So there still can be a lot of inadequacies which you in the ground can tell us, you should have done this way and not that. All right, we'll hear it. But the fact is, even after having heard a lot of people down from the ground, we've taken a course which typically, because of the experience that bureaucrats have in the ground, and also later they progress to come to Delhi as secretary to the government, their experience also gets infused into it. And that's not irrelevant at all. Even as much as I would say, sometimes bureaucracy has its Lutyens approach to many of the things which are so distant. It can be in Aurangabad or in Andaman or in Assam. Do you have a picture of it? Yes, many of them do have. I want to, at least the set with which I'm working are all people who have had their tenures in the ground. So it's not, what do you call, just a drawing board thesis that we're giving you. It is infused with a lot of ground level reality. And a last word about the fiscal deficit number, on which many people have been speculating that it'll cross 4, it'll touch 5. But I want to tell you that the experiences of the last time when India had a real tough economic situation, and the call taken at that time, and post that call, the number, the fiscal deficit number, which was touched by the government then, and then the splurging with which the economy was expected to reach a better level and rise from the bottom that it had reached, are all fresh in our mind. Yes, today we may have a situation where you'll want the government to spend, to show that you're a socialistic expression, pump priming the economy. It's all right. It's relevant jargon to use today, but it brings in a lot of memory of days when, globe was a lot more pink and red rather than white and whiter. So if that kind of a word has to be used today, and if I have to spend a lot of money, yes, we are willing to do that, but we are clearly saying that we shall not repeat the mistakes of the splurging that happened, whereas the money that is spent now is being spent with a clear picture of asset creation, public asset creation, such assets being that which can give greater connectivity to the place from where the produce has to come to the market. Connectivity so that those places which are without any reach will be improved. Connectivity to particularly districts which even don't have a minimum basic hospital facility. I have Sangeeta ji, I'm sure she knows the difference between a metropolitan which has good medical facility and some of the aspirational districts which don't have it. So the monies are being very clearly directed, and you'll know where that money goes for what. Like for instance, since again I'm talking about medicine, medical equipments import of those medical equipments which are probably not being made in India is now being brought in with a bit of a duty in it. But we very clearly said that duty which we are raising is not just going to go to the coffers for any other welfare expenditure, but that will be used for bringing medical infrastructure in those aspirational districts where there are no good hospitals at all. So we are showing very clearly where each of this money which is being raised will go. So it's not being raised to fill certain hole in the Consolidated Fund of India. The money being raised from the disinvestment will go towards infrastructure. We are showing the direction. We are telling you where the money which is going to be spent is going, so you can plan your investments and your expansion activity well in alignment with what the government does, because collectively all of us will benefit. You will facilitate the government and we'll equally facilitate the private. And anywhere also where we have indicated the government's expenditures are happening, or anywhere we have indicated where the government expenditure should happen or some other expenditure should come in, we've also said private participation, states participation, and a PPP model. Now, on the PPP model, there's no one solution. I'm sure each one can evolve. Each sector can evolve their own. So we've opened up all that. And above all, of course, Atanu Chakravarti is here. He must have spoken to you all. Have you already? No.
Yes, yes.
The biggest thing about which many of us don't speak, because India has always spoken about stock market, India has always spoken about budgetary deficits, India has always spoken about direct, indirect taxes, but the bond market, the various announcements about deepening the bond markets in India, the various announcements regarding how we can strengthen bond markets in India are, I suppose, exceptional to this budget. Exceptional. So, my opening remarks, I said I wouldn't do a long one, but it's always a temptation to speak, having been trained as a spokesperson, I suppose. So, thank you.
So with that, we'll throw the floor open for questions. Please be brief, state your name and the sector that you're in, and please ask one question, not multiple. We'll start with Pranav Sathya. Mr. Kapla, you next.
Hello, ma'am. Pranav Saita, Chairman, Taxation Committee of FICCI. You've done a commendable job in the budget, and one of those is in relation to startups. While we really welcome the move that ESOPs taxation will get deferred for employees of startups, given the way startups is defined, and given how we want to encourage employees to participate in the wealth creation that has been happening, and these are genuine ESOPs, there are clear guidelines for the ESOPs, can it be expanded to cover any and every employer rather than limiting it only to startups, particularly given the fact that the definition of startups is so narrow that otherwise it doesn't really cover what in general terms is accepted also as startup enterprises and companies. So that would really go a long way in helping.
Before answering, I want to ask you a question, or ask the how's the question. Are there startups here?
Yes.
Are you all happy with that? Before I expand it to, let's say, the others.
Yeah. So we're happy with it, but I think there's startups which started before 2016. There's startups which might not, in the technical term, qualify for this benefit. So I think we would second that.
No, that's fine. He said his piece. I'm asking you as a startup who's in that narrow band. Are you happy?
I'm not in that narrow band.
So then, is there anyone here in that band? No.
There's somebody that's saying.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I am very happy as a startup, but I am an investor in the capital markets. So capital markets are always like a good piece of thing to work in. So in my perspective and industry, I am really happy. But a small question to you, ma'am, and I have even worked with you in 2014 with you and Modi ji. Why was Sensex not happy on the budget day?
I was going to.
But I see them being happy today. So weekend mood, but today Monday is the true working mood, and today's mood is that they're happy. Aren't they? Today they're happy? Not exuberant, but happy somewhat.
Yeah, slightly.
Yeah?
Yes, it's picked up, it's picked up. Rajan Mittal. Is that hot? Ma'am, is that hot? You want to flash?
Thank you.
Yeah, excuse me.
First of all, when the secretary was here, I made this comment that the corporate world is very happy that you were very clear that the wealth creators need to be respected and a partnership needs to be developed. And also your opening comment that you are here, the government is here to support this move, and we are very glad. Ma'am, you said that Vivad se Vishwas. I mean, that's your one big theme. I hope that theme can also work in other sectors like telecom, that we can win back the government's Vishwas or the other way around.
Statement is not good. Okay. Go ahead.
Adil Shetty. On behalf of the Fintech Committee, ma'am, we were very excited. You mentioned Fintech, artificial intelligence, making India a hub. You also mentioned plans for mobile-based MSME app for lending. I think the two areas we have submitted and we'll follow up is digital KYC, everything to do around video, Aadhaar-based KYC, also around digital data access to GSTN data on a licensed secure model. So we will follow up to make that a reality.
Mohit Saraf.
Ma'am, on the disinvestment, I think we came up with a very big target. We worked with Mr. Pandey on multiple opportunities. I think one question, I think you used this word disinvestment target, you used family silver. And actually, if you think about it, really, the opportunity is there, but the 1 year window, also you can have trade union issues and a lot of the other issues. In my view, really what you're doing is really not selling assets. You're selling to create more assets. You're really recycling assets. I think it's somehow you should think about it, calling it a recycling ministry or something like that, so that it gives a positive tune. Right now, even my dad argues every day with me that why are we selling these companies? These are such good companies. So I think probably you should think a little bit about that.
Mr. Kapila.
Ma'am, my question is about GST. You see, we have two types of people who are giving you GST. One is the goods and other is the service sector. On goods, when you sell, you get the GST and you pay it. When it comes to services, even when you have not received the payment, you are asked to pay it, which is very unfair. You see, you typically want us to pay within 30 days, while the payments come sometime in 4 months, sometime in 6 months, and largely from the government itself. So this service sector is really suffering, and we have no means to really bridge the gap and be compliant with the law. And then there is a law which says that if you are punished or if you are prosecuted under GST Act, there is no bail. So one side you don't even give us, you ask us to pay in advance. On the other side, we have the Damascus sword hanging on our head that you can be prosecuted and there is no bail available. I think that that particular element should only be where you have collected and not paid, and not for the service sector. So these two corrections, I think, need an urgent change.
I don't want to interrupt you if you want to say something more, but I want to ask you, it'll help me if you can, of course with a certain sense of confidence, I'm not going to release it to the public. If you can give me the instances which are in your mind when you're saying this. The government has not paid you, and not you, whoever,
Yeah.
and as a result, the payment is held back, but you are expected to clear somebody else's bill and
You
so
see,
on. So if there are instances which has pushed you to say this, I'd like to have those instances.
There are, ma'am, innumerable instances.
No,
I can
that's
send
not
you a
right.
list. No, you see, most of the payments which we are receiving come at 120 days, 150 days, but we are, as per law, required to pay the service tax within 30 days from the time that we have raised that bill.
Exactly, and therefore I want you to help me, please. Just give me those instances
I will,
where it
ma'am.
is beyond a certain number of days. I want to really work at it and get solutions for everybody.
I'll
Across
certainly
the board, I'll take that. Thank you, Mr. Kapila. Across the board, this has been something that many of the members have said. In fact, I also have personal this thing. We will compile a detailed
That's
list
right.
and come
That'd
to you,
be
ma'am,
good.
because
That'd be
we appreciate the spirit with which you're asking, and it is a genuine problem for large companies and MSME. We will come back to you with a detailed list. Thank you so much for that. Yes.
Excuse, ma'am,
Yeah.
this is regarding, ma'am, a definition of micro, small and medium enterprises. There is a demand for change of, investment in plant and machinery to turnover-based definition. If it is not possible at this moment, ma'am, so we fixed up the limit of investment in plant and machinery way back in 2006. So can we consider something in the, raising the limits of investment in plant and machinery or the equipments for the definition of micro, small and medium enterprises?
As much as I know, the Ministry of MSME is working on this and they are about to finish the task. So if there's anything that any one of you all from here want to contribute towards what should be the definition, please contact MSME. It'll not be late, and I think you should get in to tell them.
Sanjay?
Ma'am, this is a point regarding the assets being sold by a liquidator through NCLT process and all. The liquidator is not registered with the GST, and so there is no way, there's no process to really charge GST on this. He takes GST, but he doesn't know where to deposit, and as a result, the buyer doesn't get the credit. So the process really needs to be, this needs to be addressed. And just one more point that on the just one more point on the compliances which are required to be done by an SME and by a large company. In case we can really look at some simplified sort of a thing for, as far as compliances are concerned, for SME maybe up to 500 crores or whatever that limit you think is right, I think it would really help the SMEs to really comply that.
So in this particular aspect that you have said, can you just give me a note, because it appears that what you are saying is that the GST is being collected, but there is no facility for payment because that entity is not registered. So we'll definitely try to find some way.
Sir, it's a liquidator who's appointed, so it's a professional who's appointed. He's not registered. He's selling on behalf of the company which is already closed.
That's correct. Yes. So
We'll give a note.
Right.
We'll give a note. Mr. Vikramjit Singh Sahani.
Ma'am, we couldn't find any reference. I asked the question earlier, but it got mixed up. It was not answered. In the agriculture sector, is the MSP scheme continuing or not? And if it is really continuing, the minimum support price for certain crop. Okay.
Of course.
And then why farmers are still in so much distress, and if they are getting 1.5 times remuneration of their cost, and what are the steps for distressed fertilizer industry sector with large areas?
I'm really shocked. Whatever gives the opinion of feeling that the MSP is not going? No, I don't even want to utter it. It is definitely on. And what we've given us 16-point agenda for focused activities based on the budgetary allocations are spread across the spectrum. We are looking at creating silos and warehouses of different nature as is required in different agroclimatic zones at the block and the taluk level. We are linking the local SHG groups also to maintain them, get facility through private participation to build them. We are looking at marine resources so that we'll have youth participate in it as Sagar Mitras and be the aggregators for many of the marine products. We are looking at farmers being able to produce power through solar power in their barren lands. Like I can
comprehensive list.
16. So, and all of them are, even as the MSP is active.
Can I one question? Madam, I am Veeramani, representing Capexil and as well as Southern India Chamber of Commerce and Industry. You exempted the GST as far as SEZ units are concerned. And for the 100% UOUs, we are same bonded and we work in the government supervision and control. I think it can be extended, exempted, as I am the founder chairman of the EPC for UOU and SEZ both. I'm the founder. So therefore, I think it should be exempted without hassles as we are bonded.
I'm not sure if I've said anything in the budget about this.
No budget.
Okay.
Nothing budget, madam. So sorry, very sorry. I'm not talking about budget, madam.
Okay.
See, I'm only
we'll handle
requesting.
that separately, maybe. Can we ask Harjinder?
Ma'am, my name is Harjinder, and apart from being EC member in FICCI, I'm also president of FICCI Ladies Organization. So my compliments to you, because there are a lot of things which have been done for women, and we really are grateful to you for this. Now, one small contribution that we have done as FICCI Ladies Organization, we have 16 chapters pan-India, and this year what we did, we gathered the data of grassroots level women who were having Aadhaar card, and they were into some small time roadside business, sitting on the road, but they were capable. For example, somebody is sitting with a silai machine and she's trying to do some tailoring work. Somebody is sitting with a bandi, but she's very good at making idli, but she's selling idli. When we collected this data, we have a very genuine data with photograph of these women, and some 1,000 women data we have collected. We want your ministry help if you can convert these women into entrepreneurs, and that's how we will make each family a very empowered family, if we can do that. Thank you.
So,
First of all,
1 second, please. How much time? When would you like us to use 10 to 7?
I thought you were expecting me to get out by 7 o'clock.
Yeah, no, we'll be happy. I just wanted to plan based on your thing. Okay. Please go ahead.
I'll be quick. I understand the time is short. This is for the hospitality sector. When we are constructing the hotel, there's...
Hold the mic up.
When we are constructing these fixed assets, so the GST which we pay while we are constructing these assets, while we are these fixed assets are created, there's no mechanism by way of which the GST which we can get some input credit on that for the fixed asset which is created. More so when we are harping about tourism all across the country, and we want more and more hotels. So and looking at budget hotels also, the hotels which have rooms less than 200 not even considered in infrastructure. But in any case, if I talk about hospitality at large, the GST which is paid during the construction, we do not get any input credit on that. If we can do something about it, it's just my suggestion.
Ma'am, I'll first refer the question to Mr. Modi, and then I'll ask a question myself, please. No, please, Modi, take away.
Ma'am, I have two questions related to the same thing. Two things have happened in the budget, many things have happened which are good. So I'll preface it. One thing which has happened is that the Provident Fund limit has been put for the first time ever since independence, that more than 6 lakh of Provident Fund will not be allowed to be deposited by a company. So 1.5 is superannuation, which was there earlier also, and now 6 lakh limit has been put for Provident Fund. Now what this will do is, this will discourage high paid executives, which are, many NRIs are coming from abroad nowadays back to India to work, and they are paid US salaries. For them, this is the only saving which they have after retirement. In private sector, there are no pensions or things like that. So we could not understand the logic, more so because last year you had raised the tax on high income people, which rightly so, it had gone up to 43%, 35 to 43% at different stages. So this will be another point, another 4-5% tax on them, further than what they had paid last year. So I would request that it should be considered, because this is only saving for those people who, they should not be penalized because they are getting more salary. It is same for everybody, from lowest paid worker to highest paid manager in the country. Second issue is everybody appreciates the dividend distribution tax which has been removed from the companies. It's a step in the right direction. It will get a lot of foreign investment. But as a repercussion is that the Indian shareholders, 99% will pay about 50 to 70% more tax than they are paying, than the company was paying for them. So request would be that if 18% was the tax which company was supposed to pay, DDT, then 18% you can charge from the shareholders. Otherwise, they'll have to pay up to 43%, between 35 to 43%. It is not that the shareholders are either the promoters, or they are the insurance companies, or they are the mutual funds. Nowadays, the retail investor is maybe 0.5% or 1%.
So these were the 2 points which I think should be considered favorably. Thank you.
Now about your first point, that this limit of 7.5 lakhs. Now, when the employer contributes, they should be contributing, there is a limit of 12%. So if you consider this 7.5 limits, and when this has been limited, this will only apply and only those people will get affected whose annual salary is more than 60 lakhs. Now, so we have also studied this system prevalent in the developed part of the world, because you mentioned that here when we are attracting employees, so in every country there is a limitation. In fact, if you take example of United States, they have a similar system called 401k. And in 401k also there is a limit up to which the employer, one is that how much employer can contribute tax-free to that particular part. So in this exercise that we have done, we have also tried to see that up to what limit, because it should not happen that I wouldn't say that it will happen in all cases, because having no limit also allows some scope of restructuring this, structuring the salary, salary into various components where this particular thing could be hiked up, and then the actual cash component could be less. So therefore, this threshold is not something very, very unusual that we have done. It is being developed in many parts of the world, and 401k example that I've told you, that is one. Now coming to the DDT part. The DDT earlier used to be taxed at the rate of 15% plus other surcharges. Total together used to become 20.5%. That was the DDT. Now, there has been a demand from the sections of, in fact, almost every section of the industry saying that DDT is a very, very regressive, and on many counts, particularly those investors who are retail investors falling into the lower tax bracket. They were saying that they are being unfairly treated, because if it were to be taxed at the hands of the, at their hands, and if their income was less than 5 lakhs, then they will pay no tax. Or if their income is less than 10 lakhs, then they will pay only, now that we have reduced the rate, only at the 10% or at the rate of 15%. So they were feeling as if that they were not supposed to pay tax, but they were being taxed at 20.5%. There was another class, particularly the foreign investors, because DDT is not exactly the income tax, and therefore they were not able to get credit in their home countries, because if a dividend is taxed like an income, then as per the treaty rate, the 5 to 15% tax would be charged, and to which they can get the credit in their home countries. So these were the reasons why there was a demand to abolish dividend distribution tax. In fact, this tax has been there for more than 20 years. We all know in 2002 it was abolished, but in 2003 it was brought in again. So that is how the little bit of the history, the background. Now here, after having abolished it, and now we have accepted the principle that it should be taxed only in the hands of the the investors at the applicable rate. Again, we have made a study that how dividends are being taxed in the various parts of the world, and in many in the many jurisdictions, it is at the applicable rate, and that seems to be most fair, because the suggestion that you just now gave, that charge at the 18%. Then what happens to those who are earning less than 5? Again they will be they will have a grievance. So the best option available is that wherever the applicable rate, and that should become the part of the income, because every income should be most of the income, except the few exceptions that we have made, should be taxed at the applicable rate, and that is something then nobody will have the grudge.
I think with that I'll take the pleasure of asking the last question, please, and then we'll let Mr. Somani do the formal vote of thanks. So, ma'am, we truly appreciate that across the board a lot has been done for healthcare, especially in bringing healthcare to every part of India, the aspirational districts, multiple areas. One of the things is that across the country, there is a need for high-quality beds, and it is increasingly becoming difficult to fund those beds, and the price realization per bed is going down with the skew of Ayushman Bharat increasing. So one of the tremendous schemes which you had introduced was really the sovereign funds and the ability to bring in that funding. However, healthcare is not defined as an infrastructure and may not be eligible for sovereign fund investment, and healthcare clearly needs patient capital. So our request and hope is that healthcare would be included in the infrastructure, would be gazetted into that list so that it becomes available. Sure. With that, I think we'll ask Mr. Someone else or
yeah.
two more? Okay. Come, okay. Go ahead. I didn't see you. Janvi Pukan, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Good evening, ma'am. It's a pleasure to hear you. I'm Janavi Fukan from India's Northeast, the Flow Northeast chapter. I want to thank you for the emphasis which has finally come to the Northeast. Yes. The Krishi Uran schemes and the Krishi rail schemes which will help the Northeast. The development of the inland water transport, which is long overdue. And the fact that you have, out of the 5 iconic destinations, that Sipsagar of Assam is finding a mention. And thank you too for the promotion and the emphasis your government has given on tourism. And I think as tourism and women will go very closely together, and it can be, we will seek to make it tourism as a job creator, not just a job seeker. And a sustainable tourism is really the way forward for all of us. We will work towards that.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Ma'am, my name is Badri Iyengar. I am the FICCI chair for medical device sector, and we represent both the local manufacturers as well as the multinational corporations. I think over the last 1.5, 2 years, there have been a lot of impetus and emphasis that has been given through the public procurement order, by which many tenders have basically been more on the local manufacturing side, giving more benefit to the local manufacturing on medical devices. Given that of the $5.5 billion of medical device market, 80% of it is still imported, the recent medical device cess that has been applied, we think that would basically have an impact on the patients, and if there is any ways that you could reconsider and think through on that, that would be something that we think we'll deeply appreciate.
Some thought went into deciding on the rates and also on those items which were selected. They are mostly those which are being produced in India. And if they are being produced in India, under the Make in India, I should encourage them to produce even more.
Absolutely.
And even if after that there are people who still want to import it, I have not stopped the import. I've said pay a little more. And pay a little more for what? That little more is going to go into medical asset creation in districts where, particularly in tier 1, tier 2 cities, where there are no infrastructure, medical infrastructure. So if medical infrastructure increases, there'll still be more demand on medical devices. So the cyclical works here.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Pranay Saita.
Ma'am, we completely appreciate the move towards removing exemptions and making moderate tax rates even for individuals like you did for corporations in September 2020, and that's indeed welcome. Given, however, the current need for an immediate consumption boost, particularly private consumption, would you be willing to, and I do realize there's limited headroom in terms of fiscal possibilities and the macroeconomic stability angle, is there any possibility to at least defer the exemptions or deductions available to individuals, and these are middle class individuals, for a year or two, so that the consumption, private consumption boost happens immediately? Because here otherwise a lot of...
I'm not clear. What? Defer
right
what?
Now,
Defer what?
Defer the foregoing of the deductions and exemptions, which is a condition for availing the lower tax rate.
No. I've not.
Right. There is an option today. That's
with me.
That's
correct me if I've understood you wrong.
Sure.
I have not asked you to leave your old system and come to the new system. Continue being there.
Sure.
Enjoy all the exemptions. 120 of them if you want.
Right. No, absolutely true. But what that means is most individuals may not then opt for the lower rate, which does not give the boost to
Don't worry
consumption.
about it. We'll wait for, as long as people want to come here, we'll wait for it. But we should make a beginning somewhere, right?
Sure.
So those who want to continue with the exemptions, please stay where you want. But at the same time, the government can't be waiting to come with a reformist step of minimum exemptions to start with, no exemptions at all sometime later, and really lower rates. So we've made a beginning. Choose your time. There's no compulsion.
Thank you, ma'am. Last question there.
Ma'am, sir, you have asked if I can ask my question. You had your chance. Thank you. Ma'am, while the real estate sector is under stress, one sector which is really booming is the co-living industry because of the demographic profile we have in our country. Our request is if the co-living industry, and we have made the RS also on this, could be brought under the GST because we are not defined under the GST as of now.
What is the industry?
Co-living industry.
Co-living.
Yeah, co-living. And it will provide also much needed relief to the real estate industry. Thank you, ma'am.
Your detailed and very progressive budget, in my view, raises certain questions about creativity, innovation, and IP protection. If we talk about, for example, digital technology, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing, IPR surfaces both as a facilitator as well as something which can be created through these technologies. And this thread can also be extended to, for example, startups, to MSMEs, and to medical devices, and many others. So my suggestion was, and we had created under your leadership and your guidance, the IP policy 3 years back, that we dovetail the IP implications of what you have said in the budget, and wherever appropriate, dovetail it into the IP policy, and also see if there are any changes, any upgradations, or any updations needed. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. The very last question, Mr. Mehta.
Yeah. I am Hetal Mehta from South Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We are very much thankful, first of all, for including whatever representation we have made to you. Ma'am, this is regarding making India and assembling in India we have discussed in the budget. Ma'am, it has succeeded in China, Korea, or Japan because of the geographical cluster. I think in India it is very difficult to make a geographical cluster for product or service wise. So can it be possible for we, either with the FICCI, to go with the virtual cluster by product wise or service wise to make it India or assembly in India more effective? Because it is always difficult for India because of various states and all to geographic cluster or geographical cluster in India.
I'm sure some set of our officers would have understood it. I can't understand. What is it that I have to do as government in that? Go ahead doing it. Go ahead doing it.
Yeah.
I'll be very happy if FICCI like body does it and the country benefits out of it. But what is it that we have to do? Sorry, I couldn't get it.
It is very difficult for India to have a geographical cluster like China has.
That principle I'm able to see. But what do you expect me to do for it? I'm willing to do.
No.
Let us talk about this. I think what ma'am is saying is you go ahead, put a proposal, bring the conglomerate.
Fine. We will come back to with the proposal.
And if we want any help, we'll come back to that.
We'll come back
so
to with the
we
proposal.
Understood the drift of it.
I want to ask the secretaries if they have any other
We need
to
crystallize
the thought.
Yeah, but Mr. TV Somnath, we want to thank you for being here, and also Mr. Bhushan. No, we didn't get to this thing. We didn't get to welcome them when they were coming in the beginning. So I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. T.K. Pandey also and welcome him. But formally, I'll hand over to Sandeep Somani for a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for your presence here today.
that shows your commitment to industry, to trade, to commerce right after the budget to be here at FICCI. We are also grateful for all your senior colleagues who took their time out and came here today, and all the officials from the Ministry of Finance. The union budget always attracts a lot of attention. This year it not only attracted attention, but there was high expectation because of the state of the economy and the need to do something to alter its course. While even ahead of the budget, the government has laid a lot of steps to address both sector-specific concerns as well as outline many broad-based measures to energize the growth momentum. And I can, on behalf of FICCI, say that we were pleasantly surprised, Honorable Minister, by the innovative thinking, unconventional approach, and result-oriented framework that the budget for 2021 offered at a time when markets perhaps were looking at some big bang announcements. I am sure, as elaborated by all of you, that once the intent of the announcement becomes clear, people will fully grasp the intention behind the budgetary moves, and we will see the markets joining the ranks of optimists. Many of the FICCI suggestions, be it with regard to manufacturing, agricultural sector, healthcare, education, and new age sectors, were reflected in the budget, in your budget speech, Madam, itself. And we are very grateful to you, Honorable Minister, for this considerate approach. You have been extremely engaging. You went around the country to seek ideas, suggestions, and understand the pain points of business, traders, and exporters. You have responded to the ground level concerns, and we must credit you and your team for this approach. For the industry, as was pointed out by our President, there was a lot to cheer about after the massive cut in corporate tax rates. There was measures taken to boost domestic manufacturing. Steps were also announced by you to leave money in the hands of the people at the lower end of income so that demand gets generated. And eventually all this will lead to higher private sector investments. The budget contained a blueprint to achieve and set in motion this virtuous cycle, and we are sure that as the year progresses, the industrial economy would see a turnaround. Of course, during the course of today's discussion, we saw several suggestions, requests, and clarifications, and some further ideas shared for consideration. We will send, we'll compile a list, Honorable Minister, and send it to you for your consideration. With these words, let me thank you, Honorable Minister, and all the officials from the Finance Ministry for your time. We assure you that we will carry the positive message of the budget to all parts of India, and FICCI will definitely play a constructive role in making in India a $5 trillion economy. Thank you very much.